So I am not a fan of making videos. I'm not a fan of seeing myself on video or listening to myself talk. I am willing to do this because I have something to share that matters. It's important that people hear it. And I want to add my story into the collective story of what happens to people who are on psychiatric drugs. And this is not something that just happened to me. I wish that it did just happen to me, but it's really become an epidemic in our society, and it's really scary. I struggled with depression and anxiety my whole life. I had some transitional anxiety going to university. The transition back and forth between home and my new life independent of home was really difficult. And I had struggles, and I ended up on an antidepressant and seeing a psychiatrist. And I had no idea back then at 19 the crazy journey that was ahead of me and how much of my life would be sucked out of me, how much of myself I would lose, how many years and opportunities I'd lose, all under the guise of being responsible for my mental health issues and being under the care of a doctor. And I ended up on 4 different drugs, and in the spring of 2012, I had endometriosis as well. It's another health issue that I've had to deal with. And I had several surgeries and then ended up with uterine fibroids. I had been bleeding for 9 months, which is brutal. And I had a uterine fibroid removed in the spring of 2012. And shortly after that, something inside of me just felt like the psychiatric drugs I was on were not good. And I was on 4 different drugs. The 4th drug that was added about 7 years ago was a benzodiazepine. And I was not warned more than, this could be addictive. That's pretty much all the doctor said. This could be addictive. But this was a drug that my doctor told me that I needed to take, that it would help me. And so I added it in with the rest of the drugs that my doctor had prescribed for me. And this isn't just one doctor. It's not just one weird doctor. Again, that'd be great if it was an isolated case, but it's not. I'd moved many different places over the years, so I always would find a new psychiatrist and people I really liked. Most of them I really liked and respected. And I think they really cared about me. But I think what's happened in psychiatry is really scary, and I just kept staying on these drugs. They kept me on these drugs. I was told I needed them for the rest of my life. It was like being diabetic, which it isn't. And that is totally something that I believe because I was told by multiple doctors. And why wouldn't you believe your doctor? I mean, we are taught to believe our doctor. My dad's an oral surgeon. I respect doctors. I respect medicine. And I thought I was being brave. I thought I was being responsible. So I was taking 4 different drugs, and slowly my life just was sucked away. I became sicker and sicker, more and more fatigued. I had more and more physical problems, really just a multitude of issues. And I thought it was all my endometriosis. I thought it was chronic fatigue. I thought it might be Lyme disease. I was diagnosed eventually falsely, with Lyme disease. I saw so many doctors, and retrospectively, it's like they were throwing diagnoses at me, hoping they would stick. And along with throwing diagnoses at me, they were throwing drugs at me. And it is so hideous to look back on these years and think of all of the time and the money that was sucked out of my life. All the while thinking, hey, I'm being brave and I'm being responsible. And I never really had a chance to consider having kids. I was not someone who had a burning desire for kids, but I love kids. I didn't have that deep need to have my own children, which I'm actually really thankful I didn't. But I love kids, and I would have liked to have been able to choose whether or not to have kids rather than have it be chosen for me, because for me, I was not going to become pregnant on drugs. That was just on psychiatric drugs. That just wasn't something I was comfortable with. And other women are comfortable, and they've done that, and that's fine. It's their decision, and there are plenty of children born that have been healthy. It just wasn't the right choice for me. And I was okay with that. And knowing that I was being responsible and following my doctor's orders, because I didn't have the deep longing for kids, that wasn't there, which can be brutal, I know. But I didn't have grief because I felt like I'm being responsible. Again, I mean, I am like a broken record. I'm brave. I'm responsible. So I followed the advice of my doctors over all of these years, over 16 years. And so I had the fibroid removed in 2012. I started to think that something wasn't right. I just felt like it's the drugs. I don't know how else to say it except for it was just a gut feeling. And so the fourth drug that I was put on, the benzodiazepine, I'm not a fan of any psychiatric drug, but benzodiazepines are desperately scary. They are desperately addictive. And I will let other people go more into detail on that, people with better information who have a better ability to talk about it. I get pretty emotional. I don't feel like I have all the facts laid out in front of me. I don't want to be talking about something I don't have a strong ability to talk about. But that fourth drug, the benzodiazepine, was what was kind of my undoing. It was the nail in the coffin. And the years that I was on that drug, along with the other three, but once that drug was added, the last remnants of myself were just really sucked out of me. It was the most uncreative, saddest, darkest, loneliest, bleakest time in my life. And I thought I knew what sad, lonely, dark, bleak, I thought I knew what that meant because I had been through so much already, especially going through endometriosis and all of the issues with that, not feeling well. I had suffered quite a bit because of that. And I thought I understood sort of suffering and loss, but it got taken to an entirely different level. And so I started to taper off my drug just a little bit, just to see maybe I don't need all of this, or I just wanted to kind of see what would happen. And boom, I knew I was addicted to the drug. I was physically addicted to it. I didn't understand all the terms back then. I didn't understand any of what I understand now, but I just knew that it was really bad, and I knew I had to get off that drug. I wasn't even thinking about the other three at the time. That drug, I just knew I had to get off of it, and so I began to taper off of it, and I went 3 times slower than my doctor advised, and it still ended up being way too fast for what I understand to be proper procedure now. What I did in 3 months, it should take a minimum of 18 months. That may seem like an exorbitant amount of time, and it is, but what matters when you're tapering off a psychiatric drug really isn't the time span, it's listening to your body. And so that's pretty much the guideline for the amount of the drug I was on, which wasn't huge, but it would have been about 18 months. Had my body adjusted appropriately on the small tapers, the micro tapering, I could have just paid attention to my body and maybe done it in less time than that. But again, I did it 3 times slower than my doctor advised, and I went into total drug withdrawal. And it was like being in an alternate universe, because I've never smoked a cigarette in my life. I've never done any kind of drugs except for prescription drugs. I mean, but following my prescription. It's not like, oh, I'm this pill popper, I've got tons of bottles of pills and I'm just throwing them down my throat. I have always followed my doctor's advice and orders to the T. that's just me. And I was in total drug withdrawal. And I was so sick. I was totally debilitated. I spent the majority of 6 months never leaving the house. 4 of those months, I mostly didn't leave our guest bedroom. I'm a really gentle-souled person, and I had rage issues. I had wretched insomnia. I wasn't sleeping more than an hour at a time, and not more than a few hours in a 24-hour period. I had terrible migraines, which started when I was still on that drug. Had several years of migraines. I got muscle tics and twitches. I had electricity that would shoot through my veins and my skin. I sweat all the time, and I mean, I'm not someone that sweats, and I'm not trying to sound feminine. It's just, I mean, even when I would heavily exercise, I'm just not a big sweater. And I was drenched in sweat all the time. I mean, during the day, at night, I would wake up soaked. I'd have to change my sheets and my pajamas. I mean, it was just miserable. And it was just the darkest, bleakest time in my life. And what I resent more than anything, the loss that was the deepest loss for me, was I lost my faith. My faith's been everything to me in my life. It's my glue. It's my lifeblood. And I know that God did not abandon me in those months, but it's the only time in my life where I could not find God. It was just the darkest darkness. How I describe it sometimes is it's like the Dementors in Harry Potter, where they just suck every bit of life out of a soul, and that's what it felt like. It was just blackness and darkness unlike anything. I mean, and I'd had some pretty tough times and some pretty dark down, depressing times. Nothing. Not a drop in the bucket comparatively. And it just, I could go on and on. I just want to add my truth to the collective because it matters. And again, I want to leave lots of the details to other people. I am so thankful for a really special group of people that I found on Facebook who have just been so supportive and loving, going through the similar things that I've gone through. I found them on the other side of the worst depths of my withdrawal when I had started to get better. I don't even know if I could have been helped in the depths of my despair. I don't know. There's plenty of people in my group who are in their depths and are being helped. And maybe I just didn't find that at that time because it wasn't the right time. But it's hard for me to even imagine that I could have ever been helped. All I could do and all I knew that I had to do was suffer it out. And that's gross. I mean, it really is. It's a gross waste of time, and it's not at all how I feel about life or me. I think life is about seizing the day and seizing the moment and making the toughest things beautiful. But I couldn't do that. I could not carry on. I just had to suffer. And so I kind of sequestered myself into our guest bedroom and just retracted from life. And my husband, who is just such a dear friend and such a strong and loving soul, was incredibly supportive, and that's rare. And I was very aware of how rare that was and is through all of that. Anyway, yeah, I just wanted to add my story. I hope that's enough information to make it worth listening to. I mean, I think it's worth listening to because it's my truth. And again, I wish it was a one-off. I wish this was just, I was one kind of crazy, bizarre person, but I'm not. I am one in just thousands of people. And the more people feel like they can share, the more people who find each other and realize, hey, it's not just me. I mean, it's scary how many people have similar experiences to me, and the more we're able to talk and share, the more people start talking and sharing, the more people there are. who've had these experiences. They've just been too scared, ashamed, unaware. I mean, there was so much I just didn't know. So that is the very quick synopsis of my situation. And I am finally getting back into life again. Only in the last few months have I really begun to really live again, where I can pursue my dreams and be just deeply hopeful, not just making do, not just surviving. Yeah, I'm finally not just surviving, and I'm so thankful that I was able to survive. But it's not a really pleasant way to live, and all of those side effects are gone. That debilitation, all of it, it's all gone. It's been a really long road. So that's my truth. Thanks for listening.